The envelope hit Ji-wook's kitchen table at exactly 9:32 a.m., and for 3 seconds, he just stared at it like it might explode. Prenatal paternity test results. Non-invasive, lab certified. The kind of document that changes everything or confirms your worst nightmare. And in Ji-wook's case, it was about to do both. His hands shook as he picked it up, and he knew before he even opened it what it would say, because Eunji wouldn't have shown up at his door 6 months pregnant if she wasn't absolutely certain the baby was his. She was calculated, methodical, every move designed for maximum damage, and this was her masterpiece. DNA match probability 99.97%. The words blurred as Ji-wook read them 3 times, 4 times, hoping maybe he'd misunderstood, hoping maybe Korean suddenly became a language he couldn't read anymore. But no, it was clear, definitive, scientific proof that 6 months ago, when Eunji had coerced him into her room, when she'd given him the choice between surrendering to her or losing Zara forever, when she told him afterwards she wasn't on birth control, she'd been planning this exact moment, this exact devastation. The doorbell rang. Ji-wook checked his watch. 9:45. Amara was early, which meant she'd been awake all night too, which meant she'd been thinking about his phone call from yesterday when he'd asked her to come over after dropping Zara at school, because he needed to tell her something important, something that would change everything between them again just when they'd started rebuilding trust after the custody hearings 6 months ago. He opened the door. Amara stood there wearing jeans and a sweater that looked like she'd thrown it on without thinking, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes that matched his own. She looked at his face, and her expression shifted from concern to dread in half a second.
"What happened?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Is Zara okay?" "Zara's fine," Ji-wook said, and his voice sounded strange even to himself, too flat, too controlled, like if he let any emotion through, the dam would break completely. "But Eunji came here last night." Amara froze in the middle of his living room. "What? She's supposed to be under house arrest. She violated it, showed up at my door at 7 p.m. Ji-wook closed the door, locked it, even though that was stupid because nothing could lock out what was coming. "Amara, she's 6 months pregnant. It's mine." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a fire neither of them could put out. Amara's face went through 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, pain, rage, and something else that looked like resignation, like she'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop ever since they'd destroyed his mother's empire and gotten Eunji arrested, and thought maybe, just maybe, they could build something normal. "How?" Amara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "When?" "6 months ago, the night I went back to the mansion. Day 3. Ji-wook handed her the paternity test results, because words weren't enough, because she needed to see the scientific proof that their lives were about to get infinitely more complicated. "She coerced me, blackmailed me into her room. I told you in the recordings. She said she wasn't on birth control. She planned this."
Amara took the envelope with hands that shook so badly the paper rattled. She read it once, twice. Then she sat down on his couch like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "So you're going to have a baby with the woman who destroyed us?" If you're still watching this right now, you need to understand something about what's coming in the next 43 minutes. This isn't just about a pregnancy, or a custody battle, or even justice for crimes committed, or Ji-wook and Amara living happily ever after. This is about whether love is enough when biology becomes a weapon. This isn't fiction. This is the harsh reality of the world we live in. So, before we continue, hit that subscribe button, because I promise you, the next 43 minutes are going to show you the most brutal villain takedown you've ever seen, and an ending that's going to make you question everything you think you know about forgiveness and family. And drop in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is, because this story is about to take you places you didn't know existed. Let's continue.
"I'm going to have a baby with my rapist," Ji-wook corrected, and the word felt like glass in his mouth. "There's a difference." Amara looked up at him, and something in her eyes shifted. Not pity exactly, not disbelief. Something closer to recognition, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in months. "You're calling it rape? You're actually saying it out loud?" That's what it was. She coerced me, blackmailed me, gave me a choice between her bed or losing Zara forever. That's not consent, that's assault. Ji-wook sat down next to her, but not too close, because he didn't know if she'd want him near her right now. Didn't know if knowing he was carrying this permanent connection to Eun-ji would make him untouchable. And now she's tied to me forever through a child who didn't ask to exist. Amara was quiet for a long moment, staring at the paternity test like it might change if she looked at it hard enough. Then she said something that surprised him. Unless you fight her, unless you take custody, unless you make sure she never sees this baby. Ji-wook turned to look at her. You think I should fight for custody of a child I didn't want, a child conceived through... A child who's innocent, Amara interrupted. A child who deserves better than being raised by someone who weaponized pregnancy for revenge. Yes, I think you should fight. She stood up, paced to his window, looked out at Seoul's morning traffic like the answer might be written in the gridlock below. But I'm not going to lie to you, Ji-wook. I don't know if I can be part of this. I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch you raise a baby born from your assault, to be constantly reminded that the woman who destroyed us is permanently in your life through biology.
The words hit harder than Ji-wook expected, because somewhere in the back of his mind he'd been hoping, stupidly, naively, that Amara would say it didn't matter, that they'd figure it out together, that love would be enough. But love hadn't been enough 5 years ago when he'd chosen his mother's money over their wedding. Love hadn't been enough 18 months ago when his family had orchestrated a custody battle designed to destroy her and make him a pathetic weakling. And love wasn't going to be enough now when biology had created a permanent chain between him and the woman who'd assaulted him. I understand, Ji-wook said quietly. If you need to walk away. I didn't say that. Amara turned from the window. I said I don't know if I can do this. There's a difference. But first, before I make any decisions, I need to know. I need to hear you say it. Did she really assault you, or is this your way of explaining why you slept with her? The question was fair, brutal, but fair. Because Amara had no reason to automatically believe him after everything that had happened, after all the lies his family had told, after the custody hearing where he'd testified against her under duress. She was asking for proof that this wasn't just another manipulation, another excuse, another way of avoiding responsibility. She assaulted me, Ji-wook said quietly, and he made himself look directly at her so she could see the truth in his eyes. The night before I found the black ledger, she finally caught me photographing it, told me she'd been monitoring my phone, knew about my cloud uploads, said if I exposed my mother, she'd expose me for theft, said Zara would go to her as designated guardian. Then she told me to come to a room at 10 p.m. where she triggered a custody transfer immediately. I went. I tried to bargain. She said the price for her silence was me. I tried to leave. She reminded me what would happen to Zara. So I stayed. And afterward, she told me she wasn't on birth control, that she hoped she got pregnant, that a baby would tie us together forever. That was 6 months ago. Amara's face went through another series of expressions, and Ji-wook watched her process it, watched her run through the logic, checking for holes in his story, looking for places where he might be lying or exaggerating. He didn't blame her. He'd given her plenty of reasons not to trust him. Finally, she said, "The button camera. From the custody hearing. Do you have footage from that night?" "Audio only. The camera was pinned to my jacket. I wasn't wearing it in her room." Ji-wook pulled out his phone, found the encrypted file Attorney Lee had compiled. "But I have this. Mansion security footage showing me going to her wing at 9:58 p.m. Staff witness statements that I looked distressed. Medical records from 3 days later showing elevated stress hormones and signs of psychological trauma. And I have her own words from yesterday when she showed up here. She admitted it. Said 6 months ago, day 3 of your return, I told you I wasn't on birth control." He handed her the phone, let her review everything, watched her face as she read witness statements, watched security footage of him walking to Eunji's wing like a man heading to his execution, read medical reports that documented what assault does to the body even when there are no visible bruises. "I believe you," Amara said after what felt like an hour but was probably only 10 minutes. "Not because of the evidence, though that helps, but because I know you.
I know what you look like when you're lying, and I know what you look like when you're barely holding yourself together. And right now, you look like someone who's been carrying this for 6 months and is terrified I'm going to walk away. Are you? Jiwook asked. Walking away? I don't know yet, Amara said honestly, but I'm not walking away today. Today, we figure out how to destroy her, completely, permanently, the way you destroyed your mother. Because if there's one thing I've learned in the past 2 years, it's that being kind to your enemies just gives them more opportunities to hurt you. So we stop being kind, we be ruthless, and we make sure Eunji never sees this baby.
Jiwook felt something in his chest that might have been hope, or might have been relief, or might have been the first breath he'd taken properly in 6 months. I called Attorney Lee. He's coming here in 20 minutes with a forensic specialist and a family law expert. We're filing criminal assault charges and a custody petition with parental rights termination. Good, Amara said. Let's finish this. Attorney Lee arrived at 10:15 with 2 specialists and enough legal documentation to fill a briefcase. They spread everything across Jiwook's dining table like war generals planning an invasion, because that's what this was, a coordinated legal assault designed to strip Yoon-ji of every advantage she thought pregnancy gave her. Here's what we have, Attorney Lee said, pulling out files. Button camera footage from the custody hearing 6 months ago, where Jiwook testified under duress. That establishes pattern of coercion. Security footage from the mansion showing him going to Yoonji's room the night of the alleged assault. Medical records documenting psychological trauma. Witness statements from staff. And we have her house arrest violation from yesterday when she showed up here, which means her bail is revoked and she's back in custody pending trial. What about the pregnancy itself? Amara asked. Can we use that as evidence of her intent to harm? Absolutely, the family law expert said. She was a woman named Kim Sun-hee, 50s, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Here's what we have. She admitted on record, Jiwook has it recorded, that she planned this pregnancy as revenge, that it exists to tie him to her forever. That's not maternal instinct, that's weaponization of reproduction. Combined with her pending criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy in the custody case, we have grounds to petition for full custody with termination of her parental rights before the baby is even born. How long until she gives birth? The forensic specialist asked. Approximately 12 to 14 weeks if the pregnancy proceeds normally, which means we need to move fast. File the custody petition today, get an emergency hearing scheduled within 2 weeks, establish on record that she's unfit before the birth, so we can take custody immediately after delivery.
Jiwook listened to them talk about his unborn daughter like she was a tactical objective, which she was in a way, except she was also a person who was going to exist in 3 months whether anyone wanted her or not. A child who would grow up knowing her conception was a crime and her mother was in prison, and her father didn't plan for her but chose to love her anyway. He thought about Zara and how carefully they'd had to explain the custody battle to her, how much therapy it had taken to help her understand that none of the adult war had been her fault. This baby, Sebom, he had already named her in his head, even though that was probably premature, would need the same explanation someday, the same reassurances that she was wanted despite everything. What about the assault charges? Jiwook asked. If we file those, will it complicate the custody case? It'll strengthen it, Attorney Lee said, because it establishes that the pregnancy resulted from a crime. Korean family law is clear. Children born from assault can have the perpetrator's parental rights terminated if it's in the child's best interest. And keeping a child away from someone facing 18 years in prison for multiple felonies is definitely in the child's best interest. Then we file everything, Jiwook said. Today, all of it. I want her buried so deep in charges she can't breathe. One more thing, Attorney Lee said carefully. Eunji violated house arrest yesterday. That means police can arrest her immediately. Do you want to press charges for that violation, or do you want to wait until after we filed the custody petition so she can't claim you're being vindictive? Press charges now, Amara said, before Jiwook could answer. The longer she's free, the more damage she can do. Arrest her, get her off the streets, make sure she can't show up at his door again or mine or Zara's school. End this today.
Attorney Lee nodded. I'll make the calls. Police should have her back in custody by this afternoon.
They spent the next 2 hours going through every document, every piece of evidence, every legal strategy. By noon, they'd filed criminal assault charges, a custody petition with parental rights termination, and violation of house arrest charges. By 1 p.m., police had executed a warrant at Yuji's mother's house and arrested her. By 2 p.m., she was back in detention without bail pending trial. By 3 p.m., news outlets were running the story with headlines that made Ji-wook's phone buzz non-stop with messages from board members and investors and reporters who wanted comments. Pregnant socialite arrested for violating house arrest. Yoon-ji Kang faces additional assault charges. Han family scandal continues. Former fiancé charged with coercion. Amara read the headlines on her phone and something in her expression shifted. Your mother's trial starts tomorrow. Both of them going down at the same time. The media is going to have a field day with this. Let them, Ji-wook said. I'm done protecting anyone's reputation except my daughter's. Daughters, plural, Amara said quietly. You're already counting Sebam as yours. She is mine, not because I chose her conception, but because I'm choosing her future. She deserves better than Yoon-ji, better than being used as a revenge weapon. She deserves a father who will love her despite how she was made. Ji-wook looked at Amara. I understand if that's too much for you, if you can't watch me raise the child of my assault, but I need you to know I'm doing this, with or without you, because it's the right thing.
Amara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm not making any promises yet, but I'm not walking away today. Let's see how this plays out. Let's destroy your mother and Eun-ji first. Then we'll figure out what comes after. Madam Han Soo-jin's trial began the next morning at Seoul Central District Court, and the media presence was unlike anything Ji-wook had seen since his grandfather's death 7 years ago. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions. Security had to create a corridor just so the lawyers and witnesses could get inside. The courtroom itself was packed, every seat filled with journalists, legal observers, victims of his mother's corruption who'd come to watch her fall. Ji-wook sat in the gallery with Amara beside him, and he watched his mother enter in handcuffs, wearing a gray suit instead of her usual Chanel, her hair styled but not quite as perfect as she usually kept it, her face showing the strain of 6 months in pre-trial detention. She looked older, smaller somehow, like prison had already started the work of dismantling the empire she'd built around herself. The judge called the court to order. The charges were read aloud, 23 counts spanning 2 decades of systematic corruption, bribery, fraud, conspiracy to commit custodial interference, money laundering, obstruction of justice. Each charge took 2 minutes to read, and by the end, Ji-wook watched his mother's face slowly lose its composure, the cracks showing in her carefully maintained facade.
The prosecutor stood, a woman in her 40s named Park Min-so, who'd built her career taking down white-collar criminals. Your Honor, the evidence will show that for 20 years, Han Soo-jin built her empire not through innovation or hard work, but through systematic corruption. She bribed judges to rule in her favor, blackmailed government officials to overlook regulatory violations, manipulated courts to destroy anyone who threatened her control. And when her own son tried to build a life separate from her influence, she orchestrated a campaign of terror designed to rip a 5-year-old child from her mother's arms using fraudulent legal proceedings. The prosecution will present documentary evidence, witness testimony, and recorded admissions that prove beyond doubt that Han Soo-jin is guilty of every charge filed against her. The defense attorney, an expensive hire from one of Seoul's top firms, tried to argue that Madame Han was simply a businesswoman protecting her family's interests, that the corruption charges were exaggerated, that she'd acted in good faith believing her granddaughter needed protection from an unstable home environment. It was a weak defense, and everyone in the courtroom knew it, especially after the prosecution started calling witnesses. CPS investigator Park Min-jung took the stand first, testifying under an immunity deal about the 200 million won bribe she'd accepted to file a false report against Amara. She provided bank records, offshore account statements, photographs of the hotel parking lot where she'd accepted cash.
and she testified that Madame Han had told her explicitly, "I don't care if the mother is actually unfit. I need documentation that says she is. Make it convincing."
Judge Lee Sang-wook testified next about the blackmail, the video of his affair that Madame Han had used to ensure favorable rulings, the threats against his brother's job at Hanstar, the offshore payments deposited quarterly as long as he cooperated. He looked broken on the stand, a man who'd sold his integrity and was now facing criminal charges himself, despite the immunity deal. Immigration official Choi testified about being coerced into filing false visa complaints against Amara, about the threats to expose his son's drug use if he didn't cooperate, about feeling trapped by a woman who seemed to have dirt on everyone in Seoul's power structure. By the end of day 1, Madame Han's defense was in shambles. By day 2, when the prosecution presented the black ledger evidence, every page, every crime, every victim documented in Ji-wook's photographs, there was no defense left. Just a prosecutor systematically dismantling 40 years of carefully constructed corruption. Day 3 was Ji-wook's turn to testify. He took the witness stand and raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, and every camera in the courtroom focused on him as the prosecutor began asking questions. "Mr. Han, can you describe your relationship with your mother prior to January of this year?" "Complicated. She raised me to believe family loyalty meant absolute obedience, that questioning her decisions was betrayal, that everything she did, no matter how questionable, was for my benefit." Ji-wook kept his voice steady, even though his heart was trying to punch through his ribs. "I didn't realize until much later that what I thought was love was actually control. When did you first learn about your mother's criminal activities?"
Day 2, after I returned to the family mansion, I found the black ledger. Her personal record of every bribe, every blackmail operation, every crime she'd committed over 20 years. She kept it as insurance, as leverage in case anyone ever tried to move against her. I photographed every page and uploaded it to encrypted cloud storage. Why did you return to the mansion if you'd spent 18 months building a life separate from your family? Because my mother activated a custody trap. She'd orchestrated a fraudulent CPS investigation against Amara, the mother of my daughter, filed false reports, bribed investigators, got a judge in her pocket to schedule an emergency hearing, and she told me if I didn't sign contracts giving her partial custody rights and return to Hanstar as CEO, she'd have Amara deported and Zara placed in foster care. I was trapped, so I signed. I went back and I started gathering evidence. The prosecutor led him through everything: the coercion, the custody hearing where he'd testified against Amara under duress, the button camera recording, the coordinated evidence leak that had triggered the arrest 6 months ago. And throughout all of it, Ji-wook kept his eyes on his mother, watching her face as he systematically destroyed the empire she'd built. The defense attorney tried to paint Ji-wook as an ungrateful son who'd betrayed his family for personal gain. "Mr. Han, isn't it true that your mother built Hanstar Technologies into a billion-dollar company, that she paid for your Stanford education, that every advantage you've had in life came from her work?"
Her crimes, Ji-wook corrected. Every advantage came from her crimes. And yes, I benefited. I lived in luxury, bought with bribery money. I attended schools, paid for with embezzled funds. I inherited a company built on corruption. That's exactly why I'm here. To make sure it ends with me. To make sure my daughters don't inherit this poison. Dramatic words, but the fact remains you benefited enormously from your mother's so-called crimes. You enjoyed wealth and privilege your entire life, and now you're here destroying her to save yourself. "No," Ji-wook said, and for the first time he let anger through. "I'm here destroying her to save my daughter, to save Amara, to save everyone she's victimized over 40 years. Love isn't supposed to come with invoices. Family isn't supposed to be a prison. And if exposing her crimes makes me a traitor to my family, then I'm proud to be a traitor." The courtroom went silent. The defense attorney sat down. The prosecutor rested, and the judge called a recess before defense closing arguments. Ji-wook stepped down from the witness stand and walked past his mother for the first time since he'd testified. She reached out as he passed, her shackled hands trying to grab his sleeve. "Ji-wook, please." He stopped, looked at her, and saw nothing there he recognized anymore. No mother, no family, just a woman who'd weaponized love for power. "Don't," he said quietly. "We're done." He kept walking.
The judge granted a 5-minute supervised meeting in a holding room at the defense attorney's request. Ji-wook didn't want to go, but Attorney Lee said it might be cathartic, that sometimes confronting your abuser was part of healing. So Ji-wook went to the holding room where his mother waited with a guard at the door, and he stood there, looking at the woman who'd raised him, and saw a stranger. "You are weak," Madam Han said, her voice shaking with rage and desperation, and something that might have been grief. "I wish you were never my son. Everything I did, everything was to give you the best life possible." And this was the moment, because what happens between these two in the next few minutes is about to define whether Ji-wook can ever truly be free. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because you're not going to want to miss a single second of this confrontation. And drop a comment telling us what you would say to a mother like this, a woman who destroyed lives in the name of love and called it family. "I will spend the rest of my life trying not to be you," Ji-wook said, and his voice came out cold, controlled, every word chosen carefully because this might be the last conversation they ever had, and he needed her to understand. "Mother, you are a monster. What did I not do for you? I sacrificed my pride as a man, gave away everything for this family, and you made our lives miserable. I became a fool, weak, pathetic, not just because I was trying to save Amara and our child, but because I wished you would change. I wished you and Unji would see reason. I hoped it wouldn't get to this level. I gave you chances, so many chances. I did this for you." Madam Han's voice broke, tears streaming down her face in a way Ji-wook had never seen because she never showed weakness, never let anyone see her vulnerable. "I did everything for you."
You did this to me. Ji-wook's composure cracked, and years of rage came pouring out. Now look where your evil got you. Prison, disgrace, your empire gone, your legacy destroyed, everything you built, dust. And you know what? I sleep better at night knowing I put you here, because you taught me that family is just another word for manipulation, that love is just a tool for control, that loyalty means absolute obedience even when you're destroying innocent people. You're a coward, Madam Han sobbed, just like your father. I love you, Ji-wook. You're my son. Look what you did to your own mother. Now I understand why Dad was never at peace, Ji-wook said quietly, devastatingly. You caused him so much pain, pushed him into more evil, made him complicit in your corruption until he couldn't recognize himself anymore. He died trying to escape you, and even death wasn't enough. You kept using him as an excuse for your crimes. Your father built this empire. You owe it to him to continue his work, when really you were just building your own prison and locking us all inside it. Well, I'd rather be a coward with a conscience than a beast who manipulates her own child and grandchild for power. You'll regret this. No, for the first time in my life, I have no regrets about you. I'm free. And you'll die in prison knowing your son chose love over your empire, knowing that everything you built collapsed the moment someone finally stood up to you. Knowing that your legacy isn't Han-Star technologies or wealth or power. It's this: criminal conviction, public disgrace, a son who had to destroy you to save himself.
He turned to leave. She screamed his name. He didn't stop, didn't look back, just walked out of that holding room and let the door close on 40 years of abuse disguised as family loyalty. The verdict came 1 week later. Guilty on all 23 counts. The judge sentenced Madam Han Soo-jin to 20 years in prison without possibility of parole, and additionally stripped her of all assets connected to criminal activity, which meant her Han-Star shares were forfeited, her personal wealth above 10 million won was confiscated, her legacy erased as efficiently as she'd erased so many others' lives.
The media called it the fall of a dynasty. Headlines screamed about Korea's most powerful woman brought down by her own son. Stock analysts debated what would happen to Han Star without the Han family's controlling interest, and Ji-wook watched the news coverage from his apartment and felt nothing except relief that one monster was finally in a cage. But there was still another monster loose, and 2 weeks after his mother's sentencing, Eun-ji's custody hearing was scheduled. Seoul Family Court at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the difference between this hearing and the one 6 months ago was striking. No fraudulent CPS reports, no bribed judge. Judge Kim presiding, the same woman who'd voided all the corrupt custody orders, and she looked at the assembled lawyers with an expression that said she was done tolerating games. This court will determine custody and parental rights for the child to be born to Kang Eun-ji and Han Ji-wook, Judge Kim said. Mr. Han has petitioned for full custody with termination of Miss Kang's parental rights. Miss Kang, you may respond.
Yoon-ji was brought from detention in a prison transport, 7 months pregnant now, wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too big, shackled, and placed in a wheelchair because that was protocol for pregnant detainees. She looked smaller than Ji-wook remembered, broken in a way she hadn't been even during the arrests. Being in prison while pregnant had stripped away the calculated confidence she'd worn like armor. Her public defender, a young woman who looked overwhelmed and underprepared, stood to make opening arguments. Your Honor, my client acknowledges the unusual circumstances of this pregnancy, but she maintains that she has a fundamental right to motherhood. Counselor, Judge Kim interrupted, your client is currently detained pending trial on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and assault. She violated house arrest while 6 months pregnant. She has demonstrated zero regard for court orders or the welfare of this unborn child. Please explain to me why she should retain any parental rights when she's facing 18 years in prison. The public defender had no response. How do you argue that someone who weaponized pregnancy deserves parental rights? How do you claim maternal instinct when the pregnancy was conceived through assault and planned as revenge? Attorney Lee stood to present Ji-wook's case, and he was methodical, brutal, thorough. Button camera recording from the coercion night, played in open court so everyone could hear Yoon-ji's threats. Medical records documenting Ji-wook's psychological trauma, witness testimony from mansion staff who'd seen his distress, psychiatric evaluation of Yoon-ji showing narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies, and her own recorded statements from when she'd shown up at Ji-wook's apartment admitting the pregnancy existed to tie him to her forever. Your Honor, this child was not conceived through love or mutual consent. It was conceived through criminal assault. Ms. Kang weaponized pregnancy. She stated explicitly on record that this child exists to punish Mr. Han. She has demonstrated no maternal instinct, only vindictive intent. The prosecution recommends full custody to Mr. Han with complete termination of Ms. Kang's parental rights. This child deserves better than being used as a revenge weapon.
Judge Kim turned to Eun-ji. Miss Kang, would you like to respond? Eun-ji struggled to stand despite the shackles and her pregnancy making movement difficult. She looked at Ji-wook, and for a second, something flickered in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or realization of what she'd lost. Then it hardened back to rage. "You monster!" she screamed at him across the courtroom. "You're taking my baby away!" Judge Kim allowed the outburst because she wanted it on record, wanted everyone to see exactly who Eun-ji was beneath the victim act. Ji-wook stood to respond, and the courtroom went silent. Since when did the man who wants the best for his child become a monster? Ji-wook asked, his voice calm, controlled, each word chosen for maximum impact. "You are the devil incarnate, Eun-ji. I badly wanted you to change. I took all the insults, the blackmail, the humiliation. I could have destroyed you the moment I found the black ledger, but I didn't. You know why?" Eun-ji said nothing, just stared at him with tears running down her face. "Because I hoped we could all agree to disagree peacefully. I hoped you'd see reason. I gave you chances.
Instead, you coerced me into your bed. You assaulted me. You used pregnancy as a weapon. You brought a child, an innocent child, into this world just to get back at me for something that happened 5 years ago when we were different people. And you call yourself a mother? I loved you, Ji-wook, Eun-ji sobbed. No, Ji-wook said, and his voice dropped to something quieter, more devastating. You never did. You never understood what love truly is. Love doesn't coerce. Love doesn't blackmail. Love doesn't assault someone and call it romance. Love doesn't weaponize an innocent life. You want to know what love looks like?
He turned to look at Amara in the gallery. Love looks like Amara fighting for Zara even when she had nothing. Love looks like taking every insult, every shame, every violation to protect someone else. Love is sacrifice without expectation, protection without weaponization. You'll never understand that, and that's why you'll never see this child. The courtroom was dead silent. Eun-ji collapsed back into her wheelchair sobbing, and Ji-wook turned to Judge Kim. Your Honor, I rest my case. Judge Kim reviewed the evidence for 10 minutes while everyone waited. Then she looked up, and her expression was something between disgust and professional fury. I've presided over family court for 17 years, she said. I have never seen a case this disturbing. Miss Kong, you weaponized pregnancy. You used a child, an innocent, unborn child, as an instrument of revenge. You assaulted this man. You violated every principle of parenthood before this child even exists. By the power vested in me by Seoul Family Court, I hereby terminate all parental rights of Kang Eun-ji to the child to be born. Upon birth, full custody will be granted to Han Ji-wook. Miss Kong will have zero contact, zero visitation, zero rights. The birth will occur in prison medical facility with Mr. Han present. Miss Kong will not be permitted to hold, see, or name this child. No, Eun-ji screamed. No, you can't. She's mine! Bailiffs moved to restrain her, but she was already out of control, screaming, trying to stand despite the shackles and the pregnancy and the wheelchair. They had to physically remove her from the courtroom while she sobbed and begged and screamed Ji-wook's name. Ji-wook, please, I'm sorry, please don't take my baby, please. Her voice echoed down the hallway until the doors closed. Then silence. Ji-wook sat back down, and Amara reached over to take his hand. It's over now, she whispered. Not yet, Ji-wook said. One more trial.
Yoon-ji's criminal trial lasted 3 days and resulted in guilty verdicts on every charge. 18 years in prison without possibility of early parole. All parental rights permanently terminated. And by the time the sentence was read, she looked like a shell of the woman who'd shown up at Ji-wook's store 6 months pregnant, thinking biology would save her. Then 1 week later, everything went wrong in a way Ji-wook didn't see coming. He was at his office going over Hanstar's ethics reform proposals when his phone rang. Prison medical facility. His heart stopped before he even answered because there was only one reason they'd be calling. Mr. Han, you need to come immediately. Miss Kang attempted self-harm. She tried to induce miscarriage. We stopped her, but the baby, we need to monitor closely. There could be complications. Ji-wook made it to the prison medical wing in 20 minutes and found doctors monitoring Yoon-ji in a secure room, sedated and restrained after trying to drink cleaning chemicals to cause a miscarriage. The doctors explained that they'd pumped her stomach, that the baby's heartbeat was currently strong, but they were watching for any signs of distress. Why would she try to kill the baby? Ji-wook asked, even though he already knew the answer. She told the guards before we sedated her, if I can't have her, no one can. And there it was, Yoon-ji's final act of revenge. If she couldn't keep the baby, she'd destroy the baby and make Ji-wook live with that loss forever. Except the medical staff had caught her in time, had saved Sebam from her mother's last desperate attempt at control. I want the baby delivered now, Ji-wook said. She's 8 months. That's viable. Get her out before Yoon-ji tries something else. I believe that's legal.
The doctors explained the risks of early delivery, but Ji-wook didn't care about risks when the alternative was leaving his daughter inside someone actively trying to kill her. So they scheduled an emergency C-section for the next day, and Ji-wook called Amara to tell her what was happening. "I'm coming with you," Amara said immediately. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do, because you shouldn't be alone when your daughter is born." So the next morning, Ji-wook and Amara went to the prison medical facility together, and Ji-wook was allowed in the surgical room per court order, while Amara waited outside. Eun-ji was unconscious under general anesthesia, which meant she wouldn't see the birth, wouldn't hear her daughter's first cry, wouldn't have any part in bringing this child into the world. The surgery began. Ji-wook stood in scrubs, watching doctors work and trying not to think about how wrong this all was. A baby being born in a prison medical facility, removed from a mother who tried to kill her, delivered into the hands of a father who hadn't wanted her but would love her anyway because she deserved better than the circumstances of her conception. "Baby's heart rate dropping," one of the doctors said, and Ji-wook's attention snapped back to the surgery. "Cords wrapped around the neck," another doctor said. "Cutting now." They worked fast, efficient, trained for emergencies. Ji-wook watched them lift a tiny body from Eun-ji's abdomen, watched them cut the umbilical cord and suction the baby's airways. But there was no cry, just silence. "She's not breathing," the doctor said, and suddenly the room was controlled chaos. Doctors working on this tiny person who weighed maybe 4 pounds, whose lungs weren't quite ready for air, who was fighting for her first breath while machines beeped warnings. "Come on, baby, come on!"
Still silence. Ji-wook felt his world collapsing around this moment, around this child he'd never asked for, but who was his daughter. His responsibility, his to protect, even if she'd been made from violence. Then, a tiny cry, weak at first, then stronger. "She's breathing," the doctor said, relief obvious in her voice. "Apgar score 7. She's small, but she's okay." They wrapped the baby in blankets and brought her to Ji-wook, and he held his daughter for the first time. Tiny, perfect, alive despite everything. She had his nose, his chin, features he recognized even though she was hours old. And looking down at her, Ji-wook made the choice he'd been circling for months. Behind him, Eun-ji was waking up from anesthesia. She turned her head, groggy, and saw Ji-wook holding the baby. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please, let me see her face, just her face." Guards moved to restrain her, but Eun-ji was already reaching out with shackled hands, crying, begging, "Please, I'm her mother, please." Ji-wook looked at her, and for 1 second he felt something that might have been pity. Then he remembered the coercion, the assault, the weaponization of pregnancy, the suicide attempt trying to kill this baby. She'd had chances to be better and chose revenge every time. "You gave up that right when you tried to kill her," Ji-wook said coldly. "What are you naming her?" Eun-ji screamed as guards pulled her back. "At least tell me her name."
Ji-wook stopped at the door, didn't turn around. Sebom. New spring. New beginning. A fresh start for all of us. "Sebom," Eun-ji sobbed. "My Sebom." "Not yours. Mine. Goodbye, Eun-ji." The doctors explained that Sebom would need to stay in the NICU for at least 3 weeks. Her lungs needed time to fully develop. Her weight needed to stabilize. Ji-wook and Amara visited every day, sitting beside her incubator, talking to her through the glass, promising her that when she was ready to come home, he'd give her the safest, most loving life possible. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. But finally, on a Tuesday morning, the doctors said the words he'd been waiting for. She's ready to go home. That evening, Ji-wook brought Sebom home to his apartment. Zara was waiting with Mrs. Song, the housekeeper he'd kept on after leaving the mansion. Zara saw the baby, and her eyes went huge. "Dad, who's that?" Ji-wook knelt down to Zara's level, still holding Sebom carefully. "Zara, sweetheart, this is your baby sister. Her name is Sebom." "Sister?" Zara looked confused. "But where did she come from? She's part of our family now. She needs us. She needs you. Can you be her big sister?" Zara approached carefully, the way kids do around new things they don't quite understand. She looked at Sebam sleeping in Jiwook's arms. "She's really small," Zara said. "You were that small once too," Amara said gently from where she stood by the window. "Can I hold her?" Zara asked. "Gently. Sit on the couch first."
Zara sat, and Jiwook carefully placed Sebam in her arms, supporting the baby's head. Zara looked down at her sister with an expression of wonder and responsibility and immediate fierce love, the way kids do when they're given something precious to protect.
"Hi, Sebam,"
Zara whispered.
"I'm Zara. I'm your big sister. I'm gonna teach you everything."
Sebam made tiny baby noises in her sleep. Zara giggled.
"She likes me."
And watching his daughters together, one who'd been fought for through custody battles, one who'd been born from an unfortunate circumstance but would be loved anyway, Jiwook felt something break and heal simultaneously in his chest. This was family. Not the one he'd planned, not the one anyone would choose, but a family built from choosing love despite circumstances, from refusing to let violence define innocent lives, from deciding that some chains could be transformed into something better. Amara watched from across the room, and Jiwook caught her eye. She smiled slightly, but there was something sad in it, something uncertain, like she was watching a future she didn't know if she could be part of. 1 week later, everything fell apart for the third time in ways Jiwook should have predicted but somehow didn't. Amara came over after Jiwook put both girls to bed. They sat on his couch with tea neither of them drank, and he could tell from her face that whatever she was about to say was going to hurt. "I'm leaving," Amara said, "moving back to Charleston, taking Zara with me."
The words hit like ice water. Jiwook just stared at her, his brain refusing to process what she'd said because it couldn't be real, couldn't be happening now when they'd finally destroyed all their enemies, finally had a chance to rebuild. "What? Why?" "Because I can't do this, Jiwook." Amara's voice was steady, but her hands shook around her teacup. "I thought I could. I thought watching you love Sebam despite how she was conceived would be enough. I thought seeing you destroy your mother and Unji would heal everything. But every time I look at that baby, I see the woman who forced herself on you. I see the chains that tie you to her forever. And I can't live with that constant reminder." "Jiwook, please. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I need to be honest. I love you. I never stopped. But love isn't always enough. You're going to spend the next 18 years raising a child born from... You're going to have to explain to Sebam someday how she was conceived. You're going to navigate that trauma forever. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to be part of that." Jiwook felt everything he'd fought for slipping away. "So you're just leaving? After everything?" Amara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm leaving because of everything. Because I'm tired, Jiwook. I'm tired of fighting your family. I'm tired of courts and lawyers and villains. I'm tired of being strong. I just want peace, and I can't find it here. What about Zara? She just got her sister. And she'll still have both parents. You can visit, we can co-parent across distance. But I need space. I need time. I need to figure out if I can really do this. If I can watch you raise the child of your assault and not let it poison what we had. When are you leaving?" "Next week. I already booked tickets." "And there's nothing I can say to change your mind?"
Amara shook her head. "This isn't about you. It's about me. I need to heal, and I can't heal here." She stood, walked to the door, and Jiwook let her go because what else could he do? He'd destroyed his enemies, saved his daughters, done everything right, and still somehow lost the one person who'd made any of it feel worthwhile. The door closed. Jiwook sat alone in his apartment with 2 sleeping daughters and a future that looked nothing like the one he'd been building in his head. He did everything right. He was ruthless when he needed to be, strategic, careful, brilliant. He exposed corruption, saved his daughter, destroyed his abusers. And love still wasn't enough. 8 months passed. Jiwook rebuilt his life around his daughters. Zara visited monthly, video called daily, and slowly started accepting that her parents lived on different continents, but both loved her. Sabum grew, thrived, became a happy baby who smiled at everything and everyone. And Jiwook reformed Honstar from the inside, implementing ethics programs and whistleblower protections, and cutting ties with every official connected to his mother's corruption. He became the CEO everyone said was impossible, powerful and principled, wealthy and ethical, someone who used resources to build instead of destroy. The board fought him at first, old guard who wanted the profitable corruption back, but Jiwook held firm, and slowly the company transformed into something he could be proud of. One evening, his doorbell rang. Jiwook wasn't expecting anyone, so he checked the video screen, and his heart stopped. Amara, standing there with Zara. He opened the door, shocked. "You're here? Can we come in?" Amara asked.
They came inside. Zara immediately went to find Sayam, who was in her playpen, babbling at toys. Jiwook and Amara stood in his living room, and the silence stretched between them like the 8 months they'd been apart. "I've been watching," Amara finally said, "from Charleston, following the news, the company reforms, the ethics programs, your interviews about being a single father raising 2 daughters. Why are you here?" Jiwook asked. "Because I watched you become the man I always knew you could be. I watched you choose love over revenge. I watched you treat Sayam like a gift instead of a burden. I watched you rebuild your empire on principles instead of corruption. And I realized I never stopped loving you. I just stopped trusting you. But trust can be rebuilt if both people want it." "I want it," Jiwook said immediately, "more than anything." "Then ask me." Jiwook went to his bedroom, found the ring he'd bought 3 months ago, hoping for exactly this moment, came back, knelt in his living room in front of the woman he'd loved and lost and somehow been given another chance with. "Amara Williams, will you marry me again? For real this time. No family pressure, no contracts, no manipulation. Just us, choosing each other every day for the rest of our lives." Amara was crying and smiling simultaneously. "Yes! God, yes!" He put the ring on her finger and stood and kissed her like he'd been holding his breath for 8 months and could finally breathe. From the playpen, Zara cheered. Saibam clapped because everyone else was happy, so she was happy too. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Zara was flower girl. Saibam toddled down the aisle with Amara's mother holding her hand, and they said vows that were simple and true, and not at all grand. "I lost you once by choosing power over love. I found you again by choosing love over everything. I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life. You were broken. I helped you heal. You taught me that some people are worth forgiving. Some people are worth fighting for. I choose you." 6 months after the wedding, Amara sat at their dinner table with her hand on her belly, visibly pregnant with their son. Zara was explaining something elaborate to Saibam about how to be a good big sister. Saibam was not listening, but was very excited anyway. "When is the baby coming?" Zara asked. 3 more months, sweetheart," Amara said. Zara turned to Saibam. "You're going to have a little brother. We're going to teach him everything."
Saibam clapped enthusiastically, even though she had no idea what was happening. Jiwook watched his family, his wife, his daughters, his son growing inside Amara, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Actual peace. Not the absence of war, but the presence of love chosen deliberately, fought for relentlessly, protected fiercely. Some chains are broken with evidence, some with time, some with choice. Han Ji-wook was chained by family, by corruption, by a woman who wanted revenge more than love. He broke every chain, not with violence, not with surrender, but with strategy,
which might seem weak to a lot of people, with courage, with relentless love that refused to let assault define innocent lives or let evil win through biology. This is how you win, not by being perfect, by being relentless, even when it costs everything. Some victories take everything from you. The best ones give everything back. What do you think of this ending? Did Ji-wook deserve his happy ending? Did the villains get what they deserved? Could you forgive someone in Amara's position? Drop your thoughts below. Type Afro-Korean Justice if you made it to the end, and tell me where you're watching from. Don't go anywhere. See you in the next story.
K Afro Tales. The weak will become strong one day.